Rain lashes the canvas of a makeshift tent as a miner with cracked, bleeding knuckles slides a heavy golden nugget across a splintered wooden plank. The air reeks of damp wool, unwashed bodies, and the metallic tang of dried blood. He is not paying for land. He is buying a single greasy egg and a slice of stale bread. The shopkeeper, a man with clean fingernails and a razor-sharp gaze, weighs the gold with a practiced hand. Outside, the mud of San Francisco swallows wagons whole. Yet inside this tent, a strange and brutal alchemy is at work. The miner has found a fortune, but he is starving. He trades his future for survival, proving that gold is worthless if you cannot eat it. In 1848, this place is nothing more than a sleepy outpost of 200 souls, a collection of wind-swept huts at the edge of the world. But within months, the landscape transforms into a pulsing, chaotic machine of human ambition. Tens of thousands of men from every corner of the globe descend upon the cove, turning the quiet water into a thicket of masts. The sounds of sawing wood, shouting merchants, and the braying of exhausted mules create a constant, deafening roar. San Francisco is not a city. It is a fever dream constructed on top of unstable sand and discarded trash. Every man arriving believes he will be the one to find the vein, but they are all walking into a carefully designed trap. Samuel Brannan stands at the gates of Sutter's Fort, his eyes narrowing as he watches a farmhand pay for a bottle of brandy with raw gold dust. The air is thick with the scent of pine needles and horse manure, but Brannan smells only opportunity. While others would run to the river to dig, he makes a calculated, cold-blooded move. He races back to his general store and uses every cent of his capital to buy every shovel, pickaxe, and pan in the Northern California territory. He secures the supply of flour and whiskey, effectively cornering the market before the world even knows a discovery has been made. He is not a miner. He is a predator preparing to feed on the coming migration of desperate souls. Brannan returns to San Francisco, waving a glass bottle filled with shimmering flakes and yelling his lungs out. The news ripples through the village like a shockwave, turning the town into a ghost of itself within hours. Carpenters drop their hammers, ships are left to rot in the harbor, and even the local newspaper stops printing as everyone vanishes toward the mountains. Brannan watches the exodus with a thin, satisfied smile. He has intentionally ignited the fever, knowing that every man who runs into the hills will eventually have to come back to him for a new shovel or salt. By the end of the year, he is turning over $2,000 a day, making him the wealthiest man in the entire territory. Beyond the borders of California, the announcement from the President of the United States in 1848 confirms the reality of the find. The world responds with a massive, uncoordinated stampede of humanity. Men board leaking ships in New York to sail 15,000 miles around the tip of South America, enduring freezing gales and maggot-infested rations. Others choose the jungle shortcut through Panama, where they vomit blood from yellow fever while mosquitoes use their skin as a buffet. They call themselves 49ers, driven by the belief that the dirt of California will solve their every problem. They do not realize that the geography of the Pacific is shifting against them. Every major port is mobilizing to send goods to San Francisco at prices that will shock the world. By the end of 1849, the Yerba Buena Cove is a graveyard of wooden titans. Over 500 ships sit abandoned, their crews having sprinted to the mines the moment the anchors hit the mud. The visual is haunting. A forest of rotting masts shrouded in thick gray fog, creaking in the salt air. Rats the size of small cats scurry through the deserted cabins, feasting on abandoned grain. For the city, these ships represent a sudden surplus of building materials in a place with no trees. Enterprising businessmen do not see ghosts, they see real estate. They drag the hulks onto the mud and begin a bizarre transformation. The dead ships are soon reborn as hotels, warehouses, and even a jail, forming the backbone of the city's waterfront. The city grows not outward, but upward and over itself, fueled by a relentless, dirty energy. Streets are paved with boxes of tobacco, sacks of spoiled flour, and the discarded hulls of ships that were too rotten to use as hotels. The ground is a treacherous soup of mud and waste, where a man can disappear into a sinkhole if he takes a single wrong step. In this environment, the smell is an overwhelming cocktail of raw sewage, horse sweat, and roasting coffee. Every square inch of land is worth its weight in silver. Merchants pay tens of thousands of dollars for riverfront property, and the sounds of construction never stop. San Francisco is a town that refuses to sleep, because every hour is another opportunity to squeeze out a profit. The true strategy of the gold rush is revealed in the ledgers of the shopkeepers. They understand a fundamental truth that the miners overlook. The person who sells the pickaxe is the only one guaranteed to see a return. As gold floods into the city, inflation reaches astronomical heights. While a cow costs $4 in the East, a single kilo of beef sells for $2 in the city. A common shovel that costs pennies in New York is sold for $50 to a man who has no choice. This is not just a market, it is a systematic extraction of the 49ers' capital. Most men spend everything they dig out of the mud just to stay alive, funneling their hard-earned flakes back into the pockets of the merchants who wait. Inside a general store, the air is thick with the scent of salty pork, unwashed wool, and cheap whiskey. Shelves groan under the weight of imported goods that have traveled thousands of miles to reach this muddy outpost. A miner stares at a pair of sturdy boots, realizing they will cost him half of his monthly earnings. The shopkeeper offers no discounts, knowing that behind this man stand a dozen more ready to pay the price. The markup on supplies reaches 1,000%, yet the demand never wavers. Every transaction is a tiny, localized gold rush for the owner. While the miner faces the freezing water and disease in the mountains, the merchant stays dry, counting his gold under the glow of a warm oil lamp, completely safe. By 1850, the social divide in San Francisco is as sharp as a Bowie knife. While the average miner sleeps in a rain-soaked tent or a drafty wooden shack, the successful merchants are constructing the foundations of a new aristocracy. They import velvet curtains from Paris, marble statues from Italy, and the finest wines from the banks of the Rhine. These men are not just traders, they are the new architects of power. They walk the dusty streets in tailored suits, cigars clamped between their teeth, their boots never touching the filth that swallows the lower classes. They control the banks and the political machines that govern the territory. Gold has not just built a city, it has created a hierarchy where those who sell are the undisputed kings of the frontier. A German immigrant named Levi Strauss arrives in the city with nothing but a supply of heavy canvas meant for tents and wagon covers. He watches the miners in the streets, noticing how their cotton trousers shred under the brutal labor of digging. The air is filled with the sound of tearing fabric and the complaints of men who are constantly buying new clothes. Strauss makes a legendary pivot, realizing that the canvas can be turned into pants as tough as the men wearing them. He adds copper rivets to the pockets, creating a uniform for the industrial age of mining. He is not selling a dream of gold, he is selling durability. His blue denim becomes a brand that will outlast every vein of gold in the Sierra Nevada mountains. As the surface gold disappears, the era of the individual miner with a pan begins to fade into history. The shovels of 1848 are replaced by massive, steam-powered water cannons that can blast entire hillsides into slurry. The hills roar with the sound of high-pressure jets, a mechanical onslaught that requires massive capital and corporate organization. The merchants who once sold picks and pans now invest in heavy machinery and land rights. The wealth of California is no longer a matter of luck, it is a matter of industrial scale. The 49ers find themselves transformed from independent adventurers into laborers working for the very men who once supplied their boots. The power has shifted from the riverbank to the boardroom, where the true profit of the earth is managed. Beneath the shimmering promise of wealth lies a foundation built on violence and systematic displacement. To clear the way for the shovels and the machinery, the state launches a campaign of extermination against the indigenous peoples who have lived on this land for millennia. The air is filled with the smoke of burning villages and the screams of families forced from their homes. California's first governor makes the plan clear. A war of extermination must be waged until the Indian race becomes extinct. This is not a secondary effect of the rush. It is a deliberate clearing of the board to facilitate the extraction of wealth. The prosperity of San Francisco is paid for in blood, a debt that is hidden behind the ledger books and the polished marble of the city. The earth itself begins to bleed as the industrial hunt for gold intensifies. Mercury, used to trap fine particles of gold in the sluice boxes, pours into the river systems by the millions of kilograms. The once emerald waters turn a sickly brown, choked with silt and poison that will remain for 10,000 years. Fish populations collapse as spawning grounds are buried under mountains of debris blasted from the hillsides. The visual of the Sierra Nevada foothills is one of utter devastation. Entire forests stripped bare, and valleys filled with the gray sludge of progress. The merchants selling the tools never see the destruction they facilitate. They stay in their comfortable offices, detached from the ecological nightmare that is fueling their dividends and powering the rise of their empire. For the average 49er, the dream ends not in a pile of gold, but in a mountain of debt. 1 in 12 men lose their lives to disease, violence, or the sheer exhaustion of the labor. Those who survive find that their pockets are empty, their earnings having been swallowed by the merchants who sold them their dreams at 1,000% markup. They stand on the streets of San Francisco, watching the shopkeepers and bankers stride past in their fine silks, realizing that they were never the heroes of this story. They were merely the fuel for a larger machine. The prospector is dead, replaced by a world where only the middleman and the corporate entity can survive the volatile reality of the new Californian economy. The bubble eventually bursts in 1855. The easy gold is gone, and a massive financial crash ripples through the city, toppling banks and ruining merchants who overextended their credit. The sounds of panic fill counting houses as the reality of a finite resource hits the markets. But while individual fortunes vanish, the infrastructure remains. San Francisco has transformed from a muddy tent city into a global center of shipping, agriculture, and finance. The merchants who survived the crash have laid the groundwork for a state that will become one of the largest economies on the planet. The gold was the bait used to draw population west. The real wealth is the city itself, a machine built on the labor and failures of the tens of thousands. Samuel Brannan, the man who unleashed the chaos, becomes the richest man in California, but the fever he ignited eventually consumes him. In the following years, his manic energy leads to disastrous investments and a public battle with his religion. He begins drinking to the point of madness, his court records reading like a chronicle of brawls and unpaid debts. In 1870, his wife files for divorce, and the wealth that once flowed through his fingers like water vanishes entirely. When he dies in 1889, he is penniless and alone. He lies in a cold vault for 16 months because there is no money to bury him. The first millionaire of the gold rush is buried in an unmarked grave, forgotten by the city he helped to create. The DNA of 1848 remains encoded in the skyscrapers and the server farms of modern California. The lesson of the gold rush was never about the gold. It was about the power of the platform and the control of the supply chain. Move fast, bet big, and reinvent yourself. This is the same spirit that later built Hollywood and Silicon Valley, worlds where the real profit is still made by those who provide the tools for others to chase their dreams. We are still a world of 49ers, digging through digital dirt in the hope of finding something that glitters. And as long as there is a dreamer with a fever, there will be a merchant waiting in the shadows with a shovel to sell, charging a price we will always pay.